like to do right now is kind of walk you through a part of doing protocols in a different sort of way. We've talked about doing protocols in our image. If we look up here, we have our image and we did our adjustments, and we have used our adjustments here to make most of our changes, global changes and local changes. And we've also used tools like the burn and dodge tool right here to make local changes. But now what I'd like to do is I'd like to try to combine that with the idea of non-destructive editing, which is our previous video that we did in adjustment layers, and try to look at a different way of doing this, which I think actually is a fairly convenient way of editing images. In this particular image, I have actually turned the image into a grayscale image. This originally was color, obviously. If I open up the previous example here, oh, actually it's right here. Here's the original, and what I've done is I've just changed it into a grayscale. And I've also modified it a little bit. I've actually changed the levels a little bit, so I've done a little bit of protocols to it to make it look a little bit better. But what I'd like to do right now is I'd like to again show you how to use your history brush. So bring our history panel here into view, and try to show you how I can blend this together with another procedure here called our let's make sure we're in the right tool here. This is our history brush. Over here we have a whole bunch of blend modes. We have normal, dissolve, behind, dark and multiply, color burn, linear burn, and so on and so forth. We're only going to use a few of these, and the best thing to do with blend modes, I think, when we're learning how to use blend modes, is to use them very systematically with a purpose in mind. Otherwise they get very, very confusing. So let's begin with how we use our history brush with our blend modes. If I were to pick up a blend mode, and let's start with one here called multiply. Now multiply, if I take multiply and just work in this area here, you can see, actually going to dial up my opacity a bit here, you can see that I'm actually just darkening the highlight of this rock in the foreground. Now essentially that is kind of the same as using our burn tool. We could have used our burn tool to do exactly the same thing, and that's fair enough. Also, by the same token, I can use let's make sure we're always in the right brush. I could use a screen. Now this actually lightens, and essentially is the equivalent to using our dodge tool right over here. So I guess you could say, well, what's the point? If you can do a burn and you can do a dodge, why not use the burn and dodge tool? Well, there's more to blend modes than that. For example, if I take, again, let's click back here to proper, make sure our history brush is showing. If I were to take a tool like a color dodge tool, right over here, and if I were to dodge this area, you can see that I'm actually affecting only certain parts of the image. Especially if I'm working in this area right here, you can see I'm affecting the light areas much more so than I'm affecting the dark areas. So with color dodge, it lightens areas, right, of extreme lightness. It really lightens them, but it doesn't affect the dark areas as much. Now you can see that in this area right over here, in the little water area right here, I can lighten areas, but I'm not going to lighten the dark areas as much. So it has a greater effect on the lighter areas. Now of course I'm using everything at a high opacity here. If I were to do this properly, I'd probably take my color dodge tool and turn down my opacity quite a bit. And then I could actually work in these areas, and you can see that I'm going to just affect the lighten these rocks in here, okay, I would do this gradually. I wouldn't just sort of do everything at 100%. I would just gradually bring up the highlights a little bit. So the nice thing about this is that I can affect certain values and then not affect other values. So by using this color dodge tool, I can proportionately create more highlights or lighten the highlights much more so than the darker areas. Conversely, if I were to do the same thing with the color burn tool, so color burn is right here, I'm going to do exactly the opposite. So I'm going to darken areas much more so. Alright, you can actually see right in here. Let me just magnify this area a little bit. Right in here. Okay, I go back to my tool here. If I take that, you can see that I'm really going to affect that area much more so. Actually, I'm just going to back out for a minute here. I just want to go back here. This is the area I was showing you, and I should have made a correction here. If I take my history brush tool, okay, go back up here, let's do that again. Take my color burn tool, I'm going to affect the darker areas much more so than the lighter areas. Alright, so the dark areas are being affected, the light areas are not going to be affected. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. Okay, so in a way we have a lot more control, is what I'm trying to get at here, is that using our blend modes we actually can be much more discriminating about what it is that we're changing. Now we have darkened and lightened things. Okay, we can also change the contrast of this image using blend mode. So if I go into soft light right here, soft light increases contrast in the light and the dark areas. So if I were to go in here, I can change the contrast of this. I'm going to actually take that up a notch here in the opacity to see what we're doing. Okay, so let's see, maybe we can, let's turn that all the way up, so then we can really see what's going on. Okay, here we go. So you can see that in the foreground here, I can go back and forth, and I can really crank up the contrast between. I'm going to go back and forth here. You can see I'm really changing the contrast in my image. Now, these tools can be really, really helpful, and once you kind of figure out exactly what multiply, screen, dodge, and burn, and soft light do, you can be really, really fast in making changes that you need to do in your image. So, for example, in an image like this, we know that we can make certain changes to make this image better. So, for example, in the shadow areas here, we can lighten these to a certain extent. So if we wanted to lighten, we can use our screen mode, right? So we go into here, screen, which is right here, and we can change our opacity depending on how much we want that to affect our image. So I can go in here, and in the water area I can lighten these areas. I can actually go back and forth and just keep taking the cursor in this area to make those changes. There might be some areas in here I want to lighten. Maybe the edges over here a bit. Create some center of interest in my composition right here. I can also, if I wanted to, add some more contrast in this area, so very selectively do that. I pick my soft light filter, and I just boot up that contrast in here a little bit. Maybe up in this area a little bit. Foreground, contrast in here. Maybe in the rock, bring up that line. So essentially you're painting very discriminatingly in terms of where you want contrast, where you want lightness, but you can do it very, very effectively. If if I wanted to darken certain areas in here, I could go back to my color burn, and in the color burn I can just sort of sweep across here. Now you can see that I'm going to be very dramatic about this just to kind of show you that it can be, you can have a large effect on this. I mean, obviously this is going to be way too much. I would never do it quite like that. And go back. The nice thing about history, you can always go back, and I would just tone that all the way down, and I would just be very selective about, like, you know, where I want those dark areas to be, like maybe just in the foreground here. And the lovely thing about this, you can see I'm going right over this rock here in the foreground, but it doesn't affect that rock. It keeps that nice and light while I'm still painting in some of the black areas or darker areas in here. Okay, so this is how we use our blend modes with our history brush, and it's a very, very cool way to control what happens inside your image in terms of the values of your image, just using very, very selective blend modes with your history brush. So that's as far as I want to go on this tutorial. Again, I'll provide you with a list of multiply, screen, color dodge, color burn, and soft light, and I'll give you some notes on that in class on how to make those changes and what those changes are. Okay.